Gotcha, love you. Gotcha, I love you. Love you dearly. Love you dearly.
Oh, shoot. Kim, we have another service. Can you grab me one and hand it up to me? Oh, are you just getting yours? Thank you. But yours has notes. Okay. Good morning. It is so good to see everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to this morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Providence, where we love beyond belief. Welcome to this day we have been given. May we make the very most of it, starting right now, together.
Good morning. My name is Kim Noble, and I'm standing in for Lee Rodman this morning. Please join me in saying our chalice lighting words.
This
light burns also in our hearts, and it lights our path towards harmony, justice, and hope for all.
This morning, our service is the second of a series of 3 on the history of our congregation, and as with all the services I'm preaching in this series on our history, I have to give enormous credit to the History Committee for the huge amount of research and data that they have sent me. In particular, I want to thank Phyllis Cole, Robert Owen Jones, and Sandy Schock. Robert O. is right over there. Wave, Robert, so people can see you and know you're there. And Sandy is in the back lurking behind the pillar. over there for their particular insights and contributions on which this sermon this morning is built. And I'd like to invite us all also to send our thoughts and prayers to History Committee Pillar Janet Downey-Taylor. She's in recovery after a bad fall, but she's also been a huge help. Janet, we love and miss you here today. And having said that, yes, it is history time again, and I don't want you to think for a minute that this is a tame journey that we have before us this morning. In my history sermon a few weeks ago, I spoke about the perennial faith versus deeds debate and how it shaped the covenants across the centuries in this congregation. This morning, we are looking again at those issues, but with a different perspective, looking at the lived faith and deeds and covenants of particular women leaders in this church, ministers' wives, and what they have meant to this congregation. It is a wide, winding way of lives and souls that we have to follow this morning. We're going to start 5 years ago and then jump back almost 100 years and then forward again to the mid-20th century, but it's not about the dates. I don't want us all to remember the dates. I want us to remember the names, the souls, the living, the giving of these women who have done so much and shaped so much in these same spaces. Our foremothers, whose names are not etched on a plaque in our foyer, nor in our memories. But their gifts and grace should not be forgotten and must not be unknown among us. So with that introduction, I'd like to invite us all to rise now, and as we're able, or just turn in your pews and greet each other. Take a look. We've got a small group of people here, which frankly is a relief because of the COVID levels in the state right now. But we have a small group of people who are here. Let's rise and wave to each other. Blow kisses at the people you know well enough to blow kisses to, and not at those you don't. And call out greetings to each other. And then we're going to also, of course, greet everybody who's home and not with us over at the camera that they're pointing to right now. Hi, everybody at home. Hopefully there's more than usual numbers of you at home and with us through the webcast. I'm glad you're being safe and careful there at home.
I have this week's joys and sorrows to share, beginning with some joys. A candle of good luck, break a leg, to my almost 9-year-old for her theatrical debut this weekend, playing young Fiona in Shrek the Musical. Great work, Scout. And a candle of gratitude and wonder for the animals. Yesterday I saw a snowy owl complete with his crowd of paparazzi, and this week marveled at the story of Tinsley, a real-life lassie who ran into the Vermont night to get help for his humans. A candle of remembrance for Ashley Karsten, the late mother of Isla and Lily, who passed away last year. A candle of remembrance for Paul Amaro, former husband of Lisa Rose and father of Daniel Amaro. Paul died from COVID on December 20th. Please, Lisa Rose asks, as do I, please get vaccinated. For the next few candles, prayers and especially cards are welcome. You can find addresses in the church directory. A candle of healing for Mary Kohler, who is recovering from a broken ankle. A candle of healing for Janet Downing Taylor, who is recovering from a broken hip. A candle of healing for Dave Lewis, who is still, all these weeks later, still in Rhode Island Hospital, dealing with complicated back surgeries. A candle of healing for Mary Frappier as she continues to manage a foot fracture. A candle of health and our continued prayers for Graham Nye. A candle of joy and sorrow. Joseph Reek and his husband Nilsson celebrate their 8th anniversary just in time to be diagnosed as positive with COVID. A candle of hope for Aida Wilby as she regains her health and searches for her still missing son. A candle of wellness for Barbara Slater, who is navigating some stressful illnesses. We want to send our very best wishes to Aiden, fiance of Samantha, who grew up in this church. They were due to get married, but their wedding was put off again because of COVID, so we send them our best wishes. A candle of sympathy for the passing of Presbyterian minister Reverend Murray Scott Blackadar, who worked tirelessly in Providence for social justice and the dignity of all people. And I offer a final candle for all of those things that remain unspoken on our hearts. To prepare ourselves for meditation and prayer, I want to ask you to relax, to let your body feel itself where it is, to become present with the moment. Please take a deep breath with me. And again. And once more. Spirit of life and wisdom, there is too much hardship in this world to not be the joy every day. There is too much injustice in this world to not be the balance every day. There is too much pain in this world to not be the healing balm every day. There is too much labor in this world to not be the midwives of hope every day. There is too much weariness in this world to not be the wise sages of peace every day. Let us go forth in this new year and fill this world with joy and justice, healing and hope and peace every day. Let us make this world more loving and compassionate, filled with the grace of divine presence every day. Amen.
Today's reading on being a minister's wife, a list of references. Sacred Privilege, Your Life and Ministry as a Pastor's Wife, by Kay Warren. Being a Minister's Wife and Being Yourself, by Nancy Cannell. A Handbook for Ministers' Wives, Sharing the Blessings of Your Marriage, Family, and Home, by Dorothy Kelly Patterson. Chosen to be a Minister's Wife, by Joyce Rogers. Who'd Be a Minister's Wife, by Heather Tinker. The Minister's Wife, a memoir of faith, doubt, friendship, loneliness, forgiveness, and more, by Karen Stiller. The Effective Minister's Wife, by Faith A. Oyedepo. The Minister's Wife, a novel, by Michael Cantwell. The Minister's Wife, Privileges, Pressures, and Pitfalls, by Ann Benton and Friends. 10 things every minister's wife needs to know. by Jenna Floyd. Secrets of a Minister's Wife by Letharia Siegler. Help! I'm married to my pastor. Encouragement for ministry wives and those who love them. Ministers' wives and those who love them. By Janie Ortland. A Pastor's Wife? God, what were you thinking? By Patricia Jackson Myers. How to Thrive as a Pastor's Wife. Practical tools to embrace your influence and navigate your unique role. By Christine Hoover. The Pastor's Wife. Strengthened by Grace for a Life of Love. By Gloria Furman. I Don't Want to Be a Pastor's Wife. By Phyllis Matthews.
There are more ministers' wives who have served this church than I can explore today. So let me start by saying that. More than I could ever cover in a single sermon or even just a couple. So today is a touch, a taste. And it begins with the minister's wife's pin, which I learned about a couple of months after I came here to First U. It started up in a conversation in the church office. No one knew quite what to do or even how to raise it with me, because it was a pin meant to be given to the parish minister's wife during her husband's tenure here. A lovely tradition, which I and my husband Tim obviously complicated with our arrival. People told me what the pin was and showed it to me and asked what in the world we should do. And I said it should be given to Tim, as was the tradition. And then I thought I should probably ask him first. And so I called him up right away, and I told him about the pin, all from the office, and asked him what he wanted to do. And he said, and I quote, "I want the pin." People asked if we should rename the pin, now that both Tim and I emphatically, if we should rename the pin now, and both Tim and I emphatically did not want to rename the pin, because we liked the tradition and the sentiments that went along with the tradition. And we didn't want to have political correctness get in the way of the history and the symbolism. The phrase minister's wife reflects an experience and history that still colors the role today in a way that minister's spouse does not. Neither of us is insulted or unhappy about the name being, in Tim's case, a metaphor. Because, and Tim would say this, has said it, the minister's wife is an essential role and relationship that is real, and it still exists in ways that are not so different from decades or even centuries ago. He participates in, he's up in the balcony wearing his pin, for anybody who's wondering. He participates in and supports the church as much as he can all the time. He helps host multiple church events at our house every year, and most of all, he sacrifices time with me. Our evenings, our weekends, our holidays, for the work and life of this beloved community. Our family's schedule follows, not dictates, what happens at the church. And he does all this without a word of complaint ever in all the years of our marriage. Never once. Because of the respect and faith and fulfillment that he finds in church, in this church. He holds his role with awareness and care. He comes into spaces where I am the leader and offers his perspectives to support my ministry, and he knows that whatever he does or doesn't do reflects on me or can seem a reflection of me. And he functions with those awarenesses all the time. And he wears his minister's wife's pin to church every Sunday. As far as I know, ours, First U, is the only church anywhere that does this, that gives this perennial gift to the minister's spouse in recognition of the role and gratitude for the sacrifices that go along with the role. I am so grateful for this recognition, which is so richly and universally deserved and shouldn't be so uniquely recognized as it is here. And all this is why, beyond the charm and care and delight of this gift that keeps on giving across time and gender and all that changes, lies all that stays the same, making the gift so powerful and so moving. The minister's wife is a role that asks much of its bearer, as perhaps only another minister's wife can ever really know. Because of this, as our member and historian Phyllis Cole has said to me before, it's not just the congregation and ministers who hold and serve the covenant. The minister's wife also holds and serves the covenant in a very special way with their unique role and presence, whether it is obvious or sometimes very much below the radar. I'd like to invite us to remind ourselves of that covenant now, reading it aloud together. It's on the back of your order of service. So take a moment to find it. And then let's rise in body or spirit. Everybody at home, you'll see it coming up on your screen. And let's say it together. We, the members of the First Unitarian Church of Providence, with respect for the worth and dignity of each person, with wonder at the light we know by many names, and with gratitude for our deep connection to each other and to the larger web of existence, covenant to walk together in our search for truth, seeking the paths of wisdom, compassion, and justice. Thank you. For all these reasons, I am so glad to preach this morning in this month when our worship theme is grace. as part of the series for our church's 300th anniversary and remember some of the ministers' wives who have made such a difference, who offered such grace with their service to this congregation. In fact, the pin is a great place to start because it was originally a gift from the Women's Alliance to our then minister's wife, Frances Augusta Lord, toward the end of her husband's ministry here in 1931. The Alliance, the Women's Alliance, when she was very active, commissioned it from William Brigham, a RISD professor of decorative design, jewelry, and metalsmithing. The pin is in the arts and crafts style, and it is a simple square cross set inside a circle. It's made of 14-karat gold. It has a cabochon amethyst in the center, and 4 opals, one on each arm of the cross, and 12 tiger's eye stones set in the circle that surrounds the cross. So if you're wondering why Tim wears so much bling every Sunday, now you know. It is simple and striking and attractive. It's not dainty. It's very well crafted. They gave it to Mrs. Lord, and she rarely came to church without it. Sometime later, though, she made a surprising and deeply wise and generous choice. She gave the pin back to the Women's Alliance and suggested they make it an ongoing tradition, part of welcoming every minister's wife into the life of the church and appreciating that inevitable relationship. And they did. It has gone on and on ever since then, given to every minister's wife, returned by every minister's wife, an unbroken legacy of care and regard for this unique role and for those good and generous women who have held it for almost 100 years now, since it was started. Frances Augusta Lord, who received that pin in 1931, she was born in 1866, and I have to say, think about her name, Frances Augusta Lord. That was her birth name, and honestly, even just her name suggests that she was destined to have married her husband, Augustus Menden Lord. That never happens. But it wasn't just about the names. She was well suited to her choice. She was one of 8 in the very first graduating class at Radcliffe back in 1887. She was a person who was active and energetic. She walked everywhere in Providence. She was in the Women's Alliance for over 40 years. She worked also in the League of Women Voters. And while her husband's he was the longest serving minister in the history of the church. An esteemed ministry meant that many in Providence called this congregation Dr. Lord's Church. The family joke was that the truth was she ran the church. Much of what our archives tell us about Frances Lord comes from information that was set down by others. Helen Calder Robertson, who was a 20th century member here and a historian of First U, wrote in the section about Reverend Dr. Lord, what probably they did not know, but which we do now know, was what a wonderful person his wife was. How can we express what her independence, clarity of thought, zest for life, and serenity in meeting it? Her kindly interest in all that had to do with the life of this parish and all the people that have belonged to it between 1890 and 1955 have meant to us. Frances Lord's generous spirit had a consistency and insight that's palpable. She brought that same energy that she had about the pin when she was approached by church members with the idea of placing a memorial to her husband, Dr. Lord, in the church, which is a thing that is often seen in churches, including in UU congregations. Her response was that she suggested a memorial to all the ministers who had served the church. And this suggestion was taken, and because of her, in 1949, the plaque that lists all the ministers up to James Ford, my predecessor, was placed in the front vestibule of the meeting house. You can check it out if you haven't already after the worship service, dedicated to the memory of all the ministers who have served this church, naming them all over its 300 years. I think that revisiting and sometimes discovering the history of our community is seriously thrilling. The treasures that are hidden across the names and years of our existence are so remarkable. Now we know where that plaque came from, if you've ever seen it and read it. Luisa Jane Park Hall, wife of our minister Edward Brooks Hall. We're jumping back 100 years now, as I warned you. Edward Brooks Hall is one of the ministers whose portrait hangs in our minister's parlor. But unlike her husband, Luisa Jane Hall has her own Wikipedia page, because she was an esteemed American poet and essayist and hymn writer and literary critic. She was born in 1802, and she became the highly educated only child of a father who started a groundbreaking school for girls, the Boston Lyceum for Young Ladies, in 1811. And though she struggled with partial blindness, she committed to a life of letters, publishing important works of poetry and prose. Scholars consider her to have been a seriously talented American woman writer, limited only by her own lack of confidence in her work. Her best-known works are one called Miriam, that she wrote between 1825 and 26 and published much later in 1837, which was a dramatic poem, and Joanna of Naples, an historical tale, which was published in 1838. All her writing is passionate and expressive, theological, and introspective. Interestingly, for a woman who would become a minister's wife, her stories explored the strength and resilience of women who were so often looked in Christian history. This was before she ever met her husband, centering them as essential to various stories and legends, even if they were taken for granted in their own living. Perhaps because of her unconventional intellect and abilities, Luisa Jane Park's life followed an unusual path. She married relatively late in life, at 38 years old, to Reverend Hall in 1840. And a year later, their daughter, Harriet Ware Hall, was born and likely baptized in this very space. After Luisa married, her focus shifted to her home and family, and, quote, the duties which grew out of her relation to her husband's society, unquote, otherwise known as the church. The energy she had channeled into poetry and prose went into her role, including the creation of a number of hymns. One of these she wrote as she was aging, and it speaks to the passion she felt for life and the difficulty of moving through it towards the end of her life, and the very real comfort her faith gave her, which she wished to share with others.
Never, my heart, wilt thou grow old. My hair is white, my blood runs cold, and one by one my powers depart, but youth sits smiling in my heart. Downhill the path of age, oh no. Up with patient steps I go. I watch the skies fast brightening there. I breathe a sweeter, purer air. Beside my road small tasks spring up, though but to hand the cooling cup, speak the true word of hearty cheer. Tell the lone soul that God is near. Beat on, my heart, and grow not old, but when thy pulses are all told, let me, though working, loving still, kneel as I meet my Father's will.
The impact of such creativity and devotion are apparent. Luisa's relationship with the congregation was so important that after Reverend Hall died, the church built her a home just a couple of blocks over on Benefit Street, 336 Benefit Street. Ironically, her house, which still stands, now has a plaque that identifies it as the home of Reverend Edward Hall, which is super annoying. Because it was definitely Luisa's home, built for her after he died by the church, with funds contributed by grateful parishioners, so that even without a parsonage now, she would continue to be safely established here in Providence and near this congregation. She lived there until she moved back to Boston in 1872. Luisa died 20 years later in 1892 in Weston, Massachusetts, and sadly their daughter Harriet died fairly young at only 48, a few years before her mother passed. Luisa was Reverend Hall's second wife. His first wife was Harriet Ware Hall. That's right, the same name as his and Luisa's daughter. Twists and turns, people. This is interesting. You got to wonder how that all went down, right? Harriet Ware Hall, the wife, was born in Hingham, Massachusetts, on Christmas Day in 1801, and she died at only 36 years of age in 1838. Harriet was basically Unitarian royalty. She was the daughter of the esteemed Reverend Henry Ware Sr., who was a leading light of early American Unitarianism. And she was also the sister of Reverend Henry Ware Jr. and Reverend William Ware, who were two more bright beacons who contributed greatly to the formation of our faith. She too was a woman of great intellectual passion and power, as her correspondence shows, especially the letters on faith, piety, and literature that she exchanged with her brother, Henry Jr. She married Reverend Hall in 1826, and in their 12 years together, they had 6 sons and served 2 churches in Northampton and then here in Providence. Unlike Luisa, Harriet's time in Providence led her to fill her role through work with the church that reached beyond the church. One of her most important achievements was a pamphlet from about 1837 that Phyllis Cole has preached on here. The report and proposal to the public on the subject of female wages by a committee of the Female Benevolent Society, which was located in this congregation. Harriet led that committee. She probably authored the pamphlet, and she co-signed it as the first author with other women leaders of the Benevolent Society here at First U, which was then known as the First Congregational Church. This pamphlet was a sophisticated and straightforward critique of capitalism here in Providence. It drilled down to the causes of poverty and didn't just lament the forms, and proposed legitimate alternatives in the form of an employment society workshop, store, and training operation that would offer fair wages and prices. Harriet died within a year of publishing that pamphlet at only 37 and was mourned widely across many New England communities. But her legacy continued not only in her family and the strength of this church, but in that employment society, which was not only proposed by her and the committee, but created that same year, offering, and I quote, self-supporting seamstresses employment, relief, and vocational education. And that's from a paper about it that was published in the Journal of Social History back in 1978. The Providence Employment Society, or PES, made a difference for decades until it closed sometime after the Civil War. No wonder, after all those sons and that bright life cut short, that Reverend Hall and Luisa agreed to name their daughter after Harriet. Clara Hartwell Johnson was born on the 24th of January, 1909. She became a minister's wife when she married Reverend Dr. Robert Hugo Schacht, Jr. in September of 1931 as he began his ministry here, which would last until 1968. Clara, or Bunny as she was known, was so involved in church affairs that people said she was almost a co-minister here, together with her husband. Their sons are still members here. Sandy Schacht, one of the people I pointed out to you at the very beginning of the service, who's sitting now in the back, and contributed so much to the plans for this service. I asked Sandy for any memories of his mother that he wished to share, and he wrote me this: "Mom asked my dad, 'Who do I have to be a minister's wife?' And he said, 'Just be yourself.'" And Sandy added, she was always supportive for him in any way that could help, having people over for dinner or making meals for someone in need. She also assisted in Sunday evening gatherings of college students for discussions at our house. She also showed up every Sunday for the church service in the same pew to be supportive and visual for Dad. She visited families with children when a family member died unexpectedly, when it was felt her presence would be emotionally helpful and empathetic support. When refugees came to Providence after World War II, we took some in at our house on the 3rd floor, where a kitchen and bathroom were added for their convenience, and Mom monitored a lot of that procedure. Mom and Dad were a great team for the benefit of friends and members of the church, as well as my brother and me, and as well for each other. Oh my gosh, no wonder people called her the co-minister. Clara, Bunny, shocked, pretty much was. She was doing work that is now performed by religious professionals. Roger, our pastoral care minister, Kathy, our director of religious education, myself, along with doing the helping presence at church and opening up of the home that is now offered, I am so grateful, by my husband, Tim. But Bunny didn't become the strong and shaping presence she was only by herself. She was the inheritor of all those women who had come before, who had held the role and leaned into the requirements and the opportunities that it offered. To come full circle, part of what we know about her predecessor, Frances Lord, comes from Bunny herself, who knew Frances and learned from her example. Bunny wrote this about Mrs. Lord. She was a strong person, intelligent and honest, with definite opinions, often withheld, but expressed frankly and kindly when they were asked for. She was interested in people and their problems. She was interested in life. Again, this is Bunny talking about Frances Lord. She was interested in life, in books, in the athletic contests, in fact, in everything going on around her. Most of all, she loved this church and devoted herself to her husband's career here. One of my most treasured compliments came a short time ago when I saw a woman, now elderly, but who had been young when Mrs. Lord came to Providence. She said to me, "Of course, no one could have taken Mrs. Lord's place, but you have done better than anyone else would have." Bunny also wrote about the minister's wife's pin, saying, "I have not worn the pin as regularly as Mrs. Lord did, but I have worn it often, generally to the Alliance meetings, always to church celebrations, many times on Communion Sundays, and sometimes also when I feel the need for the support and understanding and honesty of Mrs. Lord in times of trouble." Bunny's long and generous life ended on the 19th of November, 1999. But her legacy certainly continued, rolling on, wound and bound together and enflowing, as the poet May Sarton writes, plated together with all those wives who came before and those who came after, right up to now. Our church has been extraordinarily lucky in its ministers' wives. So many of our most beloved, wise, and gifted ministers have been partnered, I firmly believe, not by chance, by such beloved, wise, and gifted wives. I wish there was time to celebrate them all. Asa Hitchcock, who lived in the late 1700s and helped found our benevolent society. Her husband, Reverend Edes Hitchcock, his portrait is also in our minister's parlor, served as chaplain to the Continental Army with George Washington. The letters she wrote him from Providence while he was in the war show that she was bright, tart, funny, insightful, devoted, worried for her husband, and didn't suffer fools gladly. But she did suffer them resignedly, because she was a minister's wife. How I wish I had known her. I couldn't resist giving you an example. I thought I needed to be winding up the sermon, but I can't not share this with you. In 1782, she wrote, "I keep on scribbling all about clack, clack, just as I talk. Who think you we have got now for a preacher? Shuttleworth of Dedham, as you're alive. He arrived Friday evening with his hair stiff with powder and pomatum. He affects the beau, and makes a tolerable, smart appearance in the pulpit, and you know that goes a great ways with the Providence people. He is not a bad speaker either, but I cannot bear him, and that is all I will say about him. My tea is ready, so we'll lay by my pen. Katherine Kravith May Edes, who lived from 1782 to 1856. Her husband was Henry Edes, who served here from 1805 to 1832. Katherine was another woman from a progressive, bookish, dynamic family. Her first cousins included Abby May Alcott, mother of Luisa May Alcott, and Samuel Joseph May, the renowned abolitionist and advocate for women's rights. There are others still. There is so much more we can learn and celebrate, but the point of recounting history is never just to learn what was. It's always to learn from what was about what could be, good or bad, about our own times and ways for our own selves now. And one of the lessons our ministers' wives teach us, is about the power of courage and faith and commitment together. Courage and faith and absolute commitment united in the service of this church and this religion. The power of people faithfully united in community to make a difference, both in the offering of comfort and community, but also in the work of vision and justice making. I hear so often in Unitarian Universalism, even here at First U, about the seeming dichotomies of looking inward and looking outward, of spirituality versus justice work, of attention to our own beloved community and connections versus attention to those beyond our walls. Part of the lesson in the living and commitments and grace of our ministers' wives is that this seeming dichotomy is an illusion. It is not a polarity from one end to the other. It's a spectrum. It's a continuum within which we all live and move. And sometimes our focus is inward, and sometimes it is outward, and sometimes it's our own yearnings and struggles, and sometimes it's the imperatives and opportunities in our larger society, and sometimes it is pastoral, and sometimes it is spiritual, and sometimes it is logistical, and sometimes it is social. The life of our faith is all these things and more, depending only on our circumstances and capacities and inclinations and responsibilities. It is as big as we are big, and as deep as we are deep, and as creative as we are creative, and as strong as we are strong, and as faithful as we are faithful. Thank you, all those ministers' wives. Pillars as sure as these great stanchions that fill this hall and hold up this massive dome that shelters us all. Their presences are as important to our now as these pillars that we see around us. Thank you for your living and your legacy and your lessons. We will not forget your grace, and we will strive to remember all that you have given us. Amen. What a good time then to think about what we can give back to this congregation, to the life and the work of this beloved community that has done so much for so long, that has held so much and offered so much for so long, now that we are reminded of how much is possible only because of what we bring and our own commitments. Please give as generously as you can. You can see we've got a small group this morning, and online giving is never as strong as the in-person giving, but you people online are not off the hook. You can just click a couple times, get to our webpage, and give something for this morning's offering as well. Please give as generously as you are able as we practice this aspect of our faith, our generosity, and thank you for all that you give and all that you do and all that you are. Though we have no particular invitations that we need to share with you this morning, as always, there are many, many opportunities for ways to be practicing our faith and in community with each other. They are very available and easy to find in the weekly emails that we send and also on our website. So if you're looking for more, please check there. But in the meantime, I will turn to my benediction, which I drew from an excerpt from a piece called Our Passion for Justice, which was written by the feminist theologian and Episcopal priest Isabel Carter Hayward. We touch this strength, our power, who we are in the world, when we are most fully in touch with one another and with the world. There is no doubt in my mind that in so doing, we are participants in ongoing incarnation. We are bringing God to live in the world. For God is nothing other than the eternally creative source of our relational power, our common strength, a God whose movement is to empower, bringing us into our own together. A God whose name in history is love.
Please join me in our chalice extinguishing words. We carry the flame of peace and love and hope until we meet again.